Skyler the Dungeonologist here. I want to talk about why people don't show up to D&D and how to fix it. I'll give you my best piece of advice first, which is just run a West Marches game. Every problem I've ever had getting people to show up or stay invested or making a schedule work has been remedied by West Marches, and I'm having the time of my life. For everyone else who doesn't want to run a West Marches campaign, welcome to the rest of the video. There are three major reasons why I've seen my own campaigns fall apart. They all suck. One of them we can fix. Two of them were kind of at the mercy of other people. But the first one is relationship dynamic changes. I'm sure that some of you can relate to the sense of dread that I feel when two people in a D&D group that I've started begin to date. It feels like a countdown clock for the campaign, because when they break up, the campaign's basically over, because breakups are very seldom civil or cool. It doesn't have to be a breakup. Somebody has a kid, somebody gets married, a major shift happens in their life so that their relationship with the rest of the D&D group changes. That sucks. There's really nothing to do about it. Not all D&D campaigns finish, but all of them do end. The second reason is like a staggering schedule problem catastrophe. So one person one week is like, hey, I can't make it, couldn't get my shift covered at Applebee's or whatever. And next week someone else is like, I can't make it either. And their friend who normally comes is like, well, if they're not coming, I'm not gonna go. So they message you and they're like, hey, I'm not really feeling it tonight. And it's just you and one other person. And for the first few times that happens, you play Magic the Gathering or Gloomhaven or whatever, but eventually it spells the death of the group. And we can kind of control that a little bit. We don't want to manipulate people into showing up and prioritizing D&D. Well, that's bad. But we can help manage the amount of time that everyone's going to spend playing D&D, which I'll elaborate on later. The third reason is the easiest to fix, and that is just maintaining your players' expectations in such a way that you all know what you want out of D&D and you all get it. Or probably some compromise in the middle of what you all want. I've run Ravenloft or Expedition to Castle Ravenloft or Curse of Strahd a bunch. I've run it as a Halloween one-shot basically every year, and I've run it as a campaign more than 5 times at this point. The most recent time I ran Curse of Strahd, I told the players on session 6, no matter what else you've done, Strahd's gonna show up and you're gonna fight him. Whatever else happens is up to you. And that let us play a campaign with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The players only knew that they were gonna be on the hook for 6 sessions. They could do whatever they wanted for those 5 sessions in this module. They still knew they were gonna fight Strahd, in 6 weeks or 12 weeks or however often you play D&D. That was sort of a light bulb moment for me. I did it because I didn't have much time to run a campaign that if you played weekly would take like a year to explore all of its content, maybe more. You can do that with pretty much any adventure. Maybe not this one. They tried something cool and I don't think it succeeded. Sorry if you like Hoard of the Dragon Queen. Giving a finite endpoint like that can be really valuable to people who don't want to spend every single Thursday or Friday or whatever your game day is for the rest of their lives on the hook for your magical realm. It does front load a lot of your prep for the adventure. You kind of have to cut away the stuff that you don't think is going to work in that short of a time frame. But once you do all that work, you're prepped out for 6 sessions. That's not really that much work in the grand scheme of D&D campaigns. But let's say that you've already got a campaign going and you don't want it to fall apart, because that would suck. The next piece of advice comes from a Dale Carnegie quote that I never remember the exact wording of, but it boils down to it's way easier to make friends by becoming interested in other people than it is to try to make people pay attention to you. To put it in D&D terms, which my brain automatically does because I have a sickness, investing in their characters and what they bring to the table is going to be a lot easier than trying to get them to care about your world lore. The very act of character creation is so divorced from DM world building that it's ridiculous to expect any single character to be immediately invested in what you've got going on your side of the screen. There are games where the session 0 has this sort of integrated world building, character creating ritual. Like Fate does a really good job, but D&D just isn't like that. Most people, when they make D&D characters, it's because they've been inspired by something and want to make a character as a reaction to it. And that thing that they're inspired by is rarely your game world. So getting a completed character, finding something about that character and putting it into your world in a, major or minor way, it doesn't matter, but showing them like, hey, I think this is cool. And because of that, now there's this whole order of monks that are all doing what you're doing. And that's where you're from. And you're going to meet them out in the world and they will be hospitable and helpful to you. The last piece of advice I have for keeping the band together is knowing when to give up on something that you're trying to do. Not necessarily giving up on the campaign, but giving up on the variant rule that you're trying to use or the style of campaign maybe that you're trying to run. If you've got the people there at the table and they're not engaging with what you're putting out, there are sort of two paths. There's pivoting to something else that might work a little bit better. And then there's digging through what you're currently trying to do to find the iteration of it that really works. And that requires a lot of vulnerability and honesty and communication with your players. I've asked players before, like, hey, this inventory, this like Diablo squares on grid paper inventory system that we're using, do you like it or does it suck? And in that campaign, we didn't use that inventory system anymore. I've run sandbox campaigns where the characters from the start are like, we don't know what to do. And there's the option to either give them a hook to get them interested in exploring the world or change it to a different style of campaign and abandon the whole sandbox thing. Some groups are more suited to different types of campaigns than others. Some DMs are suited to more different types of campaigns than others. And knowing your strengths and what kind of campaign you're good at running is just as important as knowing what kind of campaign your players want to be in. Figuring out your strengths as a dungeon master can be a little tough. It requires a lot of failure, but I don't remember who said this, but it's one of my favorite quotes that a failure is much better than success that you don't understand. So when it's working and when you've got the group paying attention and they're smelling what you're stepping in, they're reading your mail, try to pay attention to the things that they're engaging with. Try to pay attention. That's the worst ADHD advice I've ever given or received. But be present in that moment and think, hey, this worked really well. Why did it work? How can I repeat this success in the future? That's all I've really got for you. If you want to learn more about the West Marches, you can check out my You're Invited to Play in the West Marches video. And until next time, take it sleazy.